Grandma, last night, I heard Mum and Dad say that tonight. You won't have anything left. They said you'll be thrown out. That's what my granddaughter whispered to me before bed. I couldn't move. I gave them everything. My time, my money, my love. But what happens when a mother becomes just a burden to be erased? The wind had that crisp bite to it, the kind that told me summer had truly left. I sat on the bench outside Terminal C, watching planes take off one last time, not because I had a flight to catch, but because after 35 years working as the head cashier at Dallas Love Field, I had finally clocked out for good. They gave me a little sheet cake in the break room, some lukewarm coffee, and a photo of me smiling in front of the gift shop with a caption that read, "Thank you, Miss Cranston, for everything." I held the frame close to my chest as I walked out. No one told me how heavy the silence would feel after retirement. I didn't own much, a small apartment near Oak Cliff, tidy but worn. My husband, Harold, passed nearly 20 years ago. Derek was all I had left, my only child. And a few months ago, he'd said the words every lonely mother longs to hear. "Come live with us, Mum." He told me it was time to stop worrying about bills and groceries. He said Ivy, my granddaughter, missed me. Said Tasha, his wife, had been warming up to the idea of having me around. I believed him. I wanted to. I packed up my place in 2 days, gave away my sofa to the building manager's son, donated my slow cooker and most of my books. I kept only what mattered: Harold's military medals, a box of black and white photos, a warm shawl Ivy had picked out for me one Christmas, and a wooden jewelry box I'd had since I was 16. I moved in with Derek's family on a quiet street just outside Garland. The house was bigger than I expected. Open kitchen, big windows, beige furniture that all looked the same. There was a guest room upstairs, meant for me, but Tasha had turned it into a mini office, so they set me up in the converted laundry room downstairs. A twin bed, no closet, and a window that barely opened. But I didn't complain. I told myself this was just an adjustment. That first week, Ivy curled up next to me every night after dinner. She was 10, all knees and big brown eyes. She told me about her school, her dreams of being an architect, her favorite YouTube show about squirrels that solve mysteries. Her laugh filled that cold little room in a way that made it feel like home. And I told myself, over and over, this was the right decision. I was close to family, I wasn't alone. I had a place again. But even then, little things felt off. Tasha never looked me in the eye. She spoke to me like I was a temporary guest. There was always this pause in her voice, like she was trying not to say something. And Derek, my boy who used to hold my hand during storms, had become distant, cold. "Work," he said. "Always work." Still, I told myself they just needed time, that I needed time. Families adjust. One night I made meatloaf. Ivy loved it. Tasha pushed it around her plate and ordered takeout. Derek didn't even come home for dinner. That was the night I sat outside in the backyard after cleaning the dishes, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, wondering if I had made a mistake. But I still smiled when Ivy ran out to hug me goodnight. I still believed there was love here, somewhere under all the quiet. I didn't know then that what waited for me was not adjustment, it was erasure. And if you've ever been through something like that, if someone made you feel like a guest in your own family, then maybe you already know what came next. It started with the milk. I reached into the fridge one morning and saw a small sticky note stuck to the gallon. It read, "For cereal only, please ask before using." I stood there in my thin robe, the cold air brushing my knees, staring at those 6 words like they were written in another language. Ivy's cereal sat untouched in the pantry. No one was awake yet. I closed the fridge without pouring myself a cup of coffee. That same day, I noticed my pillowcase had been changed. It wasn't mine. The soft, cotton floral one I'd brought with me was gone, replaced with a scratchy hotel white cover. When I asked Tasha casually if the laundry had been done, she said without looking up, "Oh, we're simplifying linens. Keeps things consistent." Her voice had no edge, but also no warmth, just clipped and clean. I let it go. But then, a few days later, I saw my name listed in a note on the family's dry erase board by the fridge. The list read, Trash bins, Eloise, Guest bathroom Eloise, Mail, Derek, Dishes, Rotate. My name was not on the rotation. It was fixed, assigned. I ran my fingers over the ink, then erased it. That evening, it reappeared in darker marker. I had worked my entire life, woke at 5 for decades, paid every bill, never once asked Derek for a thing, not even when Harold passed and I was left with 2 mortgages and a leaking water heater. Now I was being scheduled like a cleaning lady, but I didn't say anything. It felt petty. I was in their house, after all. At least Ivy still came to sit with me at night. That was my lifeline. Every evening she'd sneak into my tiny room with a flashlight and a book. She whispered stories about school projects, playground drama, and once, a pretend business she wanted to start called Ivy's Sky Houses, with tiny homes suspended in trees. She reminded me of Harold, quiet, but dreaming big. Then came the incident with the medicine. One evening, I walked into the kitchen just as Tasha was talking on the phone. She didn't hear me at first. I heard her say, "Yes, but she forgot the stove again. I don't think she's fully there anymore. Derek and I are trying to figure out long-term care options." My throat closed up. I hadn't forgotten the stove. I had turned the burner off when Ivy came in needing help with her backpack zipper. I had even gone back to check. Twice. I backed away slowly and didn't say a word. That weekend, a man came to the house. Tasha said he was an insurance advisor doing a policy update. She asked if I could provide my social security number and date of birth for household safety paperwork. I didn't like the tone. Something in me knew not to give it. I told her I'd prefer to speak to him directly before sharing anything. She smiled, then never brought it up again. But my gut stayed twisted for days. A few mornings later, I overheard Derek in the hallway telling Ivy to knock before going into my room. "Just to be safe," he said. Safe from what? I wondered. From the woman who'd rocked him to sleep through every fever and flu. From the grandmother who'd saved coins in a jar for Ivy's school trip last year. Then there was the night Ivy didn't come in. I waited, book open on my lap, lights dimmed. Nothing. No knock. No whispers. I heard laughter upstairs. She was watching a movie with her parents. A silly thing to be hurt by, maybe. But that small absence made the silence in my room feel unbearable. The next day, I tried baking banana bread. It was always Ivy's favorite. The smell used to bring her running. But now, she didn't come down. When I offered a slice at dinner, Tasha said Ivy had already brushed her teeth. Derek didn't even look up. The loaf sat untouched for 2 days. It wasn't one big blow that told me something had shifted. It was 100 paper cuts, a dozen small moments that made me feel like I was slowly disappearing, like I was becoming more of a fixture than a person, like my presence was something to manage, not something to treasure. I caught myself forgetting things, not because my memory failed me, but because I stopped trusting it. When people around you insist on rewriting your actions, your mind starts to bend. I found myself apologizing for walking into rooms, for using the last of the paper towels, for asking what time dinner was. Things I never used to apologize for, things that didn't need apologies. And still, I told myself to wait. Maybe it would get better. Maybe they were just busy, tired, stressed. Maybe if I stayed quiet, blended into the background, the warmth would return. But deep down, I had already started to know. They weren't busy. They were pulling away. And I was letting them, letting myself vanish a little more each day. The night air had turned cold. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and stared at the ceiling in silence. The old ceiling fan above me spun slow, rhythmically clicking like a metronome. I counted the turns just to keep my mind from going places it shouldn't. There was something uneasy in the air lately. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. The hallway light flicked on under the crack of the door. Then came a knock. Soft. 2 taps. Before I could sit up, the door creaked open, and Ivy slipped in, wearing her fuzzy socks and an oversized sweater. She carried a small flashlight cupped in both hands like a candle. She climbed up on the bed beside me and leaned in close. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ba ơi, con nghe ba mẹ nói. Tối mai ba sẽ không còn gì cả. Bị đuổi ra đường đó, ba. The flashlight trembled slightly in her hand. I blinked. I wasn't sure I heard her right. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Her eyes were wide, searching my face for something. Reassurance, maybe. But I couldn't give it. She looked down and continued. Ho, nói ba qua ra. Họ nói ba không nên ở đây nữa. Rồi ba nói về việc thay đổi khóa cửa. I felt my lungs tighten. The room suddenly felt much smaller. My hands were cold even under the covers. I reached for her hand, and she clung to me like a child hiding from thunder. We sat there a long moment without speaking. Then she pulled something from her sweater pocket. A small plastic flash drive. She placed it on my nightstand and whispered again. Con đã ghi lại. Không biết có giúp được gì không, nhưng con không muốn họ làm vậy với ba. Then she hugged me tight, kissed my cheek, and tiptoed back out the door. I sat frozen. My body didn't move for minutes. Just my mind, spinning, reeling. I stared at the flash drive. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to believe it held anything more than nonsense. Children hear things wrong all the time. Twist words, misunderstand. But Ivy was a smart girl, and she looked scared. That night I didn't sleep. I woke up before the sun and went through the kitchen like usual, pretending everything was fine. Tasha was already there in her pressed yoga pants and perfect ponytail, stirring her coffee with that same metallic clink. Derek came down a few minutes later and kissed the top of her head, murmuring something about his 10 o'clock call. Ivy didn't come down. At breakfast, I watched them. Every movement, every glance. I studied Derek's face like it was a stranger's. For the first time, I noticed the lines on his forehead weren't from stress. They were from calculation. That afternoon, I searched my room. My bank folder was missing. I kept it in the bottom drawer of the small white dresser, always tucked beneath my church sweater. It wasn't there. I pulled every drawer out, checked under the bed, behind the curtain rod. Nothing. Then I opened the closet and noticed something else. My lockbox, the one Harold and I used to keep our marriage certificate, the life insurance policies, and our small stash of emergency cash, had been opened. I never left it open. I never left it unlocked. But the latch hung open like someone had taken a crowbar to it. There were papers inside, but not the ones I remembered. The insurance folder was gone. The birth certificates. The final letter Harold wrote before he passed, folded inside a Bible. All gone. In their place was a new stack of forms, some with my name typed across the top, others with signatures that looked like mine but weren't. The loops were too neat. the slant too perfect. A forged signature is easy to spot when it's your own. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding one of the documents in my lap. It was a form transferring financial power of attorney to Derek. My knees went weak. My throat burned. My hand shook as I held the page, rereading each line like it would change. Ivy was right. They weren't planning to push me away next year. They were doing it now. I took the flash drive and went to the small public library 5 blocks away. I used one of the public computers near the window. My hands hovered over the mouse before I clicked the file. The audio began mid-sentence. It was Derek's voice. Calm. Cold. She won't even notice if it's gone. I already had the lawyer draft it. If we do it after dinner, she'll be tired, maybe even confused. Then Tasha's voice, crisp like glass. Good. I told the real estate guy to come Friday. Once she's out, we can lock the house and say she wandered off again. My stomach turned. Another voice came on, garbled, then Derek again. We tell Ivy it's temporary. We send her to camp or something. She doesn't need to see this part. I stopped the playback. My hand was gripping the mouse so hard I had to shake it loose. I walked home slowly, though my heart raced. The sun was going down, and the porch lights were flicking on across the neighborhood. I paused at the edge of the driveway. From the street, the house looked so normal. Curtains drawn, flowers still blooming in their beds. But everything behind those walls had changed. That night, I didn't wait to be told. I packed a small bag quietly, just enough clothes for a few days. I took the flash drive, a notepad, and one photograph of Ivy from last Christmas. I left the rest. Then I sat at the foot of the bed until morning, waiting for the next move. Because now I knew, and there would be no more pretending. I woke up early that morning, just before 6. Something in my chest felt tight, as if my body already knew what was coming before my mind caught up. I moved slowly, letting my feet find the floor. The air felt still, too still. I reached for the doorknob and turned it gently. It didn't budge. I tried again, this time with more pressure. Locked. I stood there, hand on the knob, heart pounding steady and hard. I hadn't locked the door. I never did. I reached for the light switch, but the power wasn't working either. No hallway light, no glow under the door, just silence. I looked around the room. My purse was missing. The side table drawer where I kept my ID, health card, and small emergency cash envelope had been emptied. I opened the closet. My coat was gone. I reached under the bed for my rolling suitcase, the one I always kept packed with essentials just in case. It was sitting there, but when I opened it, my clothes were folded too neatly, like someone had repacked them for me. On top of everything was a folded piece of paper. One word: goodbye. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands were cold. My face felt tight. My mind kept cycling between disbelief and a kind of numb surrender. I didn't cry. Not then. An hour passed, maybe more, before I heard the front door shut. I waited. Then I tried the door again. This time, it opened. I stepped into the hallway and found silence. The house was empty. Ivy's bedroom door stood wide open, her backpack gone. The kitchen light was off. No coffee, no cereal boxes on the counter like usual. Only a printed itinerary taped to the fridge. Family weekend getaway. 3 days, no pets, no guests. They left. I walked to the front door. That's when I saw it. My suitcase, now zipped, sitting outside on the porch next to a grocery bag of what looked like toiletries and a Ziploc bag with my prescriptions. A scarf of mine had been tossed on top. as if added at the last minute. The door clicked shut behind me. When I reached for the handle, it didn't turn. The locks had been changed. There was no note, no explanation, no one in sight. I sat down on the front step and stared out at the street. It was quiet, just like every other Saturday morning. A few cars passed. A man walking his dog waved politely, unaware that the woman on the porch had just been evicted from her own life. I stood slowly and picked up my things. There wasn't much weight to them, which somehow made everything feel heavier. I started walking. I walked for over 3 miles. No coat, no wallet, just the clothes I slept in, a small bag of travel-sized soap and toothpaste, and a locked suitcase filled with clothes someone else had packed for me. The wind picked up. A cold front had rolled in overnight, and the air bit at my skin. I held the scarf over my chest, gripping it closed with one hand, while dragging the suitcase behind me. I passed rows of houses, some with pumpkins still on the porch, others already decorated for Christmas. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. By the time I reached the old gas station near the edge of the airport grounds, I was shivering. The man behind the counter was new, didn't recognize me. I asked if I could sit for a bit inside the warm area near the back where they used to let employees take breaks. He didn't argue, just nodded, barely glancing my way. I sank into the plastic chair near the vending machines and placed the suitcase by my feet. My fingers trembled as I unzipped it to double-check its contents. Nothing had changed. Still no ID. Still no money. But then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Stuffed in one of the side pockets, folded in a worn, zippered pouch, was a small wooden box. I opened it slowly. Inside were a few official papers, my old marriage license, a copy of my birth certificate, and a flash drive tucked into a paper envelope labeled in Ivy's handwriting, "Play this when alone." I stared at it for a long time. The lettering was shaky, but unmistakably hers. I didn't have a laptop or phone to check it. Not yet. But I knew whatever it was, Ivy had risked something to get it to me. Something important. Something dangerous. I sat back and closed my eyes. My legs ached, my chest was tight. But for the first time in days, I felt a thread of clarity begin to form. They wanted me gone. They had planned this, but Ivy had not given up on me, and neither would I. The back of the gas station was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the soda machine beside me. I sat there, gripping the small wooden box in my lap, tracing the edges with my thumb. Ivy's handwriting on the envelope tucked inside stayed burned into my memory. Play this when alone. I didn't have the tools to listen to it. No laptop, no phone, nothing. But I knew someone who might help. I opened the papers inside the box more carefully now. My marriage license from 1972, a notarized copy of my birth certificate, a paper from the county courthouse listing an old joint savings account I had opened with Gerald, my late husband. And tucked behind everything was a letter of amendment from a decade ago, when Gerald had added a survivorship clause, naming me as the beneficiary to our remaining estate. I had completely forgotten about it. It was sealed in plastic, and still had the county clerk's stamp on it. I had no idea how Ivy had gotten her hands on it, but I was beginning to understand why she had warned me. I packed the contents back into the box and zipped it inside my suitcase again. My legs were sore, but I stood and thanked the young man behind the counter, who barely looked up. I stepped back into the cold. There was only one person I could think to go to. Meredith. She lived in the complex across from the train tracks, about 2 miles west. We had worked together for 15 years before she retired early due to back surgery. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since she moved in with her sister for a while. but I remembered the unit number, and I remembered her kindness. I walked the full distance, dragging the suitcase behind me, stopping only once to drink from a park fountain. It was nearly noon when I rang the buzzer. Her sister answered, wary and unsure. When I said my name, she paused for a long beat before the door buzzed open. Meredith came to the hallway in a robe and slippers, leaning on a cane but still sharp-eyed. Her face softened as soon as she saw me. "I was hoping you'd come." She led me inside, fixed me a warm cup of tea, and sat beside me while I told her everything I could in the simplest terms. She didn't interrupt, just listened. When I showed her the box, her face changed. She asked if I trusted her enough to call someone she knew, someone who might help. I said yes, without hesitation. That evening, Sheila Green walked into Meredith's apartment. Sheila was a woman in her early 50s, with quiet eyes and a leather bag full of files. She introduced herself as a legal advocate for elder women who had experienced housing exploitation. I didn't even know that was a thing, but apparently it happened more often than people realized. She reviewed every paper in the box, slowly, carefully, like someone handling old glass. Then she pulled out a small silver laptop, connected the flash drive, and pressed play. It was a recording. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but the voices were unmistakable. Derek's voice came first, casual and calculated. "She doesn't check the accounts anymore. I already signed the transfer papers. As long as we get her to the doctor, we can get the form certified." Then Tasha, her voice quieter but sharper. "And once the mental competency report is in, she's out. We can lock the doors, change the codes. It'll be clean." There was a pause. "Ivy's suspicious," Tasha said. "She asked why Grandma's room doesn't get Wi-Fi anymore." Derek laughed. "She'll forget. She's a kid." That was the end of the file. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there, staring at my reflection in the black screen of the laptop after it went still. Meredith rubbed my shoulder. Sheila looked at me carefully. "I don't want to sue them," I said. "I don't want revenge." Sheila nodded. "Then let's build something instead." The next morning, we filed a notice with the county registrar to place a temporary hold on all property transfers tied to the old estate. Sheila did it pro bono. She also began preparing a public complaint, not for court, but for city council and local news outlets. Not to punish Derek and Tasha, but to make a larger point. Later that week, Sheila and I visited a local women's resource centre, where she introduced me to the concept of community housing trusts for elder women. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the sound of my son's voice on that recording. So familiar, so distant, a son I had raised, a son I had trusted, but somehow the thing that hurt more was the way Tasha had spoken about me, like I wasn't even a person, like I was an obstacle, something in their way. But Ivy had seen me, she had heard them, and instead of looking away, she had done something. I held that truth close. They had tried to erase me, quietly, methodically, but I wasn't gone, and I wasn't alone. I still had my name, I still had my voice, and I was just beginning to use it. The next morning, Meredith made me scrambled eggs and toast. I hadn't eaten a real breakfast in days. She didn't hover. She just set the plate down with a gentle pat on my shoulder and poured me some coffee. I remember staring at the steam rising from the mug, wondering how something as small as a hot drink could bring such comfort. Sheila returned by mid-morning. She had a printout of the estate freeze documents and a new plan on the table. We would file a formal property protection order based on elder coercion and medical fraud. She explained it calmly, like she had done it before. Not once did she treat me like a helpless old woman. But that wasn't the most important thing she brought. She introduced me to a group of women, some in person, some through video call, who had gone through the same thing. Women who had been pushed out of homes they helped build. Women whose names had been quietly removed from bank accounts and wills. They called themselves the Quiet Daughters. It started as a support group, but now it was a legal advocacy network for women over 60 who had been displaced by their own families. I sat on Meredith's couch, listening to women from different corners of Texas share their stories. One was a retired librarian from El Paso. Another had been a music teacher in Houston. All of them had been silenced in one way or another, and yet none of them gave up. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled. I told them about Derek and Tasha, about Ivy's whisper, about the box and the recording. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Not pity, not shock, just knowing. That same day, Sheila invited me to join a larger idea, something long-term. She showed me the concept plans for a project she had dreamed of for years, but never had the funding or personal story strong enough to bring to light. A housing trust for women like us. She wanted to build transitional housing that was safe, legally protected, and most importantly, dignified. A place where women weren't just rescued, but rebuilt. You could be the face of it, she said, softly but directly. You've lived it, and you still have your legal rights. The land is in your name. The story is yours. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to become some kind of symbol. I just wanted peace. A place to sleep without fear of locks changing behind me. But that night, lying in the guest room Meredith had cleared out for me, I kept thinking about Ivy. Her tiny fingers pushing that USB into the box. Her voice in the dark saying, "They're going to put you out, Grandma." What would she remember if I stayed quiet? That silence was safer? That love meant letting people erase you? No. So the next morning, I said yes. Sheila moved quickly. We started drafting a formal trust. She called it the Cranston House for Independent Women, named after me, though I didn't feel like I deserved it. Not yet. I donated the value of the land Gerald and I had once purchased back when we were first married. I had forgotten we even owned it. Turns out, Derek didn't know about it either. It had remained in my name all along, untouched and undeveloped. It would be enough to break ground. Meanwhile, Sheila arranged for the media team from the councilwoman's office to come record an interview. Not a smear piece, just the truth. A retired public servant, legally displaced, speaking for the first time. When they placed the microphone on my blouse, my hands shook. But I didn't cry. I spoke slowly, as clearly as I could. I told them how it started with small things. Dismissive words, missing documents, medication jokes. Then one day, I woke up and my home wasn't mine. I didn't say Derek's name. I didn't blame Tasha. I just said, sometimes the people you trust the most stop seeing you as a person. That's when you have to decide if you still see yourself. The interview aired that Sunday. It wasn't sensational, but it spread. Women from 4 other states reached out to Sheila's office by Monday. One of them, a woman named Lorraine from Tulsa, wrote me a letter. She said, "I thought I was crazy, but now I think I'm just invisible to the people I love. Thank you for showing me I'm still real." I folded that letter and kept it in my pocket for weeks. By the end of the month, the paperwork for the housing trust was approved by the county. Meredith and I celebrated with peach pie in her kitchen. I still didn't know what would happen with Derek, or with Ivy, but I knew what was next for me. I was going to speak. I was going to stand. And this time, no one was going to push me aside. While Derek and Tasha prepared for Ivy's birthday party, like everything was normal, I was living out of a small room at Meredith's house, planning something they could never see coming. There was no yelling, no threats, just quiet movements, controlled breath, and a deep, low ache I had turned into something sharp. Sheila spent her mornings at the county records office, securing every detail for the Cranston House Trust. At night, she and I met in Meredith's kitchen, going over forms and legal filings with a fine-tooth comb. Meredith took care of the rest, meals, laundry, making space for me to breathe. She didn't ask for anything in return. I wasn't just living in her house, I was held in it. Safe. But Ivy. I couldn't stop thinking about Ivy. I didn't know what she was being told, whether she was being made to forget me, or if Tasha had filled her ears with poison. That fear would wake me up in the middle of the night, chest tight. Then one afternoon, Meredith found me outside with a pile of papers in my lap. "Are you ready to fight them yet?" she said. I nodded. That was the day we set everything in motion. We decided the party would be the perfect place. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Derek and Tasha. It was about the people watching from the sidelines, the ones who had heard whispers but stayed silent. It was time for the truth to stop being private. I still had the USB Ivy had given me. I had kept it in a velvet pouch with my old airport badge and Gerald's watch. Sheila had it cleaned, restored, and the file backed up on a secure drive. The recording wasn't long, but it was enough. Their voices clear as day. "We'll say she's unstable. No judge is going to believe a 70-something woman with memory problems. Once we get her in the facility, we move fast. I already talked to my cousin in real estate. We'll flip the house before the month's out. She doesn't need that money. She's had her turn." I listened to it once, then never again. We bought a small Bluetooth speaker, one of those flat ones that fit in a purse. Meredith tested it twice with Sheila to make sure it would connect instantly. The plan was to walk in through the back during the party, not to cause a scene, just to interrupt one. The day of Ivy's party came. I wore a pale blue blouse and soft grey pants. My hair pinned back, clean but simple, not dressed to show off, dressed to be myself. Meredith parked 3 houses down. We walked the rest of the way with the speaker tucked under a sweater in her tote. We waited until the music inside shifted from classic jazz to something poppy and loud. It was Ivy's favourite playlist. I recognized every song. The sliding glass door in the back wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. Tasha never expected anything to happen that wasn't in her control. We stepped into the kitchen just as Tasha was filming a live video. Derek was near the drinks table, laughing with 2 other couples. Ivy was nowhere in sight. Meredith gave me a nod. I turned on the speaker. At first, the sound was faint. Then came the unmistakable line. "She's not stable. Once she's out, we take the house." The music stopped. The room didn't go silent. It went frozen. Tasha's hand dropped. The phone clattered to the floor. Derek turned toward the sound, like someone had pulled a wire in his back. I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. "I just came to say thank you for showing me so clearly where I don't belong." No one said a word. I turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with Ivy. She had been watching from the hallway, her small face pale, her hands clutching the railing. She didn't cry. She didn't run to me. She just nodded, slow and sure, like she understood everything all at once. Meredith and I walked out the way we came. That night, Sheila called to say the clip had already been shared over 100 times. The story was spreading, and not just on social media. Local news stations were requesting interviews. Legal aid offices were reaching out. I didn't care about any of that. I went to bed thinking of Ivy, wondering if she'd still remember the sound of my voice, wondering if someday she'd forgive herself for not saying anything in that moment. She didn't need to. I had already forgiven her. The seed was planted, the silence was broken, and I had only just begun. I stepped through the back entrance of the event hall with Meredith steady at my side. The noise from the front, laughter, clinking glasses, and cheerful music, was muffled here. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Sheila had timed everything. Ivy was already inside, pretending nothing was wrong, and Meredith had the speaker in her purse, fully charged and connected to the Bluetooth system Ivy secretly gave us access to. I had rehearsed in my head how I'd feel seeing them again. I had thought I would shake, but I didn't. I felt steady, clear, like I had finally remembered who I was. From the hallway, I could hear Tasha's voice ring out above the music. She was giving one of her polished little speeches, the kind she loved to give when she thought everyone adored her. I could picture her fake smile, her hand on Ivy's shoulder, her eyes scanning the room for likes and shares. She said something about family, about love, about legacy. Meredith gave me a look and I nodded. She pressed play. The moment the audio started, it was like time caught its breath. At first, a few people looked around, confused. Then came Derek's voice. Clear, cold, calculated. We get her declared mentally unfit. She'll lose all claim to the house. The bank paperwork's already in. She won't even realize until she's gone. A hush fell. The party music stopped. No one spoke. Then Tasha's voice, unmistakable, smooth and sharp. I told you, get her out before the end of the month. The neighbors think she's confused already. Use that. I walked into the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply walked forward, past the shocked faces of their friends, past Tasha's frozen smile, past Derek's pale expression. I looked directly at Ivy, who met my eyes with quiet courage. Then I turned to the guests and said calmly, "Thank you all for coming. It's good you heard it for yourselves. I won't stay long." People started whispering, stepping back from Derek and Tasha as if they were radioactive. Someone shut off the Bluetooth. Too late. Everyone had heard. Tasha tried to speak. Her voice cracked. That recording is fake. But her face said otherwise. Derek stood there, mouth open, eyes wide. He looked like a boy who'd just been caught with matches in his hand and a house on fire behind him. I didn't look at him. I walked over to Ivy and gently brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She looked up at me and whispered, so only I could hear, "You did it." I didn't cry. I had done enough crying. I had lived too long in the corners of people's comfort, too quiet, too forgiving. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. And it had finally found air. Sheila arrived minutes later, holding the press packet we had prepared. The local news had been tipped off by Meredith. They weren't there yet, but they would be. And when they came, there would be no dodging, no lying, no rewriting the story. I turned toward the exit, Meredith waiting for me there like an anchor. As I walked, people moved aside. A few women nodded at me with a look I understood deeply. Recognition. One older man, whom I vaguely remembered from Derek's childhood baseball games, whispered as I passed, "You've got more grace in your pinky than they have in their whole house." I stepped outside. The air felt lighter, cooler, not from the weather, from relief. Ivy joined me a few seconds later, wrapping her arm through mine. We didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. Back in the car, as Meredith drove us home, I finally let out a long breath. It wasn't over. The paperwork was still in motion. The public statement would be made in the morning. But the hardest part, the fear, the silence, the pretending, was behind me now. I had walked into that party not as the woman they tried to erase, but as someone who remembered her own worth. And that changes everything. By the time we pulled into Meredith's driveway, I could already feel the ground beneath me had shifted. I hadn't just exposed a betrayal. I had declared, without screaming, that I would no longer be disposable. That night, I didn't lie awake like I had so many others. I slept. Not peacefully, not yet, but without fear. For the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself. And I knew I would again. By the following Monday, the story had spread far beyond our neighborhood. What started as a small act of defiance inside a backyard birthday party had made its way to the local paper. From there, the story caught fire online. But I hadn't come to embarrass them. I had come to reclaim something I didn't even know I had lost until that night: my dignity. That morning, I walked into the city municipal office wearing my old navy coat, the one I used to wear to work during winter shifts at the airport. Sheila waited for me by the marble steps. She handed me a clipboard and whispered, calm and steady, that all the documents were ready. All I had to do was sign. I stood before the press in a modest room at City Hall. Reporters, mostly from local outlets, sat with recorders on their laps. Ivy, bless her heart, sat in the front row beside Meredith. I met Ivy's gaze. Her eyes were steady, proud. I read my statement aloud, slowly and clearly. I announced the creation of the Cranston House for Independent Women, an initiative to convert the suburban home that once confined me into a transitional shelter for older women displaced by family abandonment or coercion. It would be fully funded through the equity of the house and supplemental retirement savings I had transferred through Sheila's help. Then came the twist no one expected, not even Ivy. I revealed that years ago, when my husband died, he had left behind an overlooked clause in his will, an old condition set by his mother before he inherited the house. If the home was ever used to exclude a legal dependent or surviving spouse, ownership would revert to the municipal trust until further ruling. Sheila had dug it up. It meant that when Derek locked me out, when they declared I was no longer mentally sound, they didn't just cut me off emotionally. They violated a legal stipulation neither of them understood. A reporter asked about pressing charges. I said I wouldn't. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in prevention. This wasn't about one mother. This was about hundreds like me. Women who had been erased quietly, made to feel like they were fading away. Later that day, Ivy knocked on the door of the temporary office space I had borrowed for the initiative. She asked if she could help. I gave her a stack of flyers and a list of neighborhood organizations we planned to visit. She didn't hesitate. She slipped her backpack on and said, "Let's start now." That evening, Sheila called. She told me Derek had made contact. He tried to challenge the property transfer, but had already signed off on the refinance documents without reading the conditions I had added weeks prior. His name was nowhere on the new deed. He had given it all away in his rush to make me disappear. And Tasha? She vanished from social media. Their influencer project dissolved within days. Their real estate ambitions fell apart. I heard whispers of a bank investigation, tax misfilings, unclaimed income, suspicious transfers. But I didn't dig. I didn't need to. That night, I sat on the porch with Ivy. We didn't speak for a while. The air smelled like cedar mulch and warm brick. Finally, she looked up and asked if she could invite her friend Monica to volunteer too. I said yes. There, under the porch light, she told me she had recorded the night they planned to take me out of the house. She had hidden her phone under the hallway table and saved the file without knowing why. She said she hadn't planned to show me, but when she heard Tasha lie about me during the party, something inside her snapped. I didn't cry. I reached over and held her hand. I told her she had done more than protect me. She had reminded me that even when people break your heart, The truth can still come back home. And when it does, it doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. That was the night the Cranston house began. Not with press conferences, not with lawsuits, but with a girl slipping a file into a wooden box and a woman deciding she had stayed silent long enough. Within a week of the press conference, the ripple effects had reached further than I imagined. Derek's name began to circulate not just in whispers, but in legal notices. The IRS flagged his filings. Someone from the city clerk's office tipped off the audit department. In the haste to transfer accounts and shuffle assets, Derek had exposed himself. There was a time I would have felt bad. I might have tried to explain it away, told myself he was just stressed, or misled, or too proud to ask for help. But not now. That version of me didn't exist anymore. He had made his decisions. So had I. Sheila told me the audit would take months, but the preliminary findings were already serious. Several property tax filings were doctored. Funds had been funneled through an LLC that technically didn't exist anymore. Tasha's influencer income, it turned out, had never been declared properly. Now both of them were facing not just fines, but a formal investigation. Meanwhile, Cranston House was quietly gaining momentum. Meredith organized donation drives through her church network. A small group of retired women began meeting weekly in our converted living room space. We didn't talk about loss, not always. Sometimes we just sat together and shared tea in silence. Other times, stories spilled out like old letters pulled from boxes. Women who had been abandoned, gaslit, stripped of their voice. And yet they were still standing. Ivy began spending more time at the house than at home. One evening I found her asleep on the couch, papers scattered all over her lap. She was helping Sheila's team organize a resource map for senior housing programs. I covered her with a quilt and sat beside her for a moment, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. A child should never have to choose between her parents and her conscience. But Ivy had, and she had done it with quiet strength that humbled me. A few days later, she asked if she could stay with me for a while. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. I made up the guest room and left the door open. Derek showed up the next morning. He didn't knock. He just stood by the mailbox, arms crossed, eyes red. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who wore a brown corduroy jacket to school and held my hand on cold mornings. But the man standing there wasn't that boy anymore. He asked if Ivy was there. I told him she was safe. That was all. He said Tasha had moved out, that she blamed him for everything. He looked like a man who had just realized he was the last one left in a house full of echoes. He started to say something else, then stopped. I didn't fill the silence. I just waited. Finally, he said he was sorry, not for what he did, but that it had come to this, that I had chosen a public stage instead of calling him first. I didn't say anything back, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to explain. Some bridges aren't burned in fire. Some just quietly rot until they collapse. He walked away without asking to come inside. That night, Ivy helped me prepare dinner for the women's group. She made her grandmother's chicken soup recipe from memory. I didn't know until then that she had memorized it. I watched her move around the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, voice calm. She looked like she belonged there. During dinner, one of the women, Linda, shared how her daughter had tricked her into signing over her retirement condo. Another nodded, then another. The stories were all different, yet achingly familiar. Loss that doesn't scream, only sits heavily on the chest. But tonight, there was laughter too. There was comfort. And for the first time in a long while, there was no pretending. As we cleared the dishes, Ivy asked if she could invite a few of her classmates from school to visit next weekend. She wanted them to hear these stories. not to pity, but to understand. I said yes. Later, after everyone had left, Ivy sat beside me on the back steps. She leaned her head on my shoulder. She told me she didn't miss the old house. She missed me. I placed my hand over hers. She didn't have to say anything else. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to believe until now. I hadn't lost everything. I had lost what never truly saw me, and gained the one person who did. The following week arrived with a stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. For once, my mornings were not stirred by anxiety or uncertainty. Instead, there was a steady rhythm to the day. Ivy had settled into the guest room with a sense of quiet belonging. She had begun tutoring some of the younger girls from Cranston House in the evenings, helping them with math and college applications. She was no longer a visitor. She was part of the place. But change, even when it's right, comes with its own ache. I received a letter from the court regarding Derek's financial misconduct. The language was cold, clinical. They were recommending charges based on falsified filings and misuse of foundation funds. The letter was addressed to me only because some of the paperwork still had my name listed from the original family trust. Reading it, I felt no satisfaction, only grief. Not the kind that brings tears, the kind that settles behind your eyes and stays there. That night, I sat on the porch after everyone had gone to bed. The wind rustled through the trees in the backyard, soft and familiar. I thought about Derek's face the last time I saw him. Lost, but still too proud to say the truth out loud. And I wondered how someone could be raised by your hands, under your roof, and still grow into a stranger. The next day, Sheila called. She said something had arrived at her office that I needed to see in person. When I arrived, she handed me a small box with a note clipped to it. The handwriting was Derek's. Inside was the pocket knife I gave him when he turned 13. A note said only this: I should have carried this better. I closed the box slowly. No apology. But something close. Not closure, but maybe a crack in the wall. Back at Cranston House, a local reporter asked if she could profile the women and the program. I declined the interview, but I agreed to let her sit in during one of the weekly gatherings, provided she remained a silent observer. She came. She sat in the corner of the room while women told stories of being silenced, dismissed, discarded. She cried without making a sound. Afterward, she sent me a thank you card. No article, just words about how she saw her mother differently now. Sometimes, the quietest moments make the loudest changes. One evening, Ivy came into the kitchen with a small notebook. She said she had been writing down things the women said that stuck with her. Quotes, phrases, even small poems. She asked if she could create a booklet and print them for everyone. She wanted to call it Quiet Fires. I told her it was perfect. We printed the first run using donations from one of the women's church groups. Ivy bound each one by hand with simple thread and a cardstock cover. They weren't flashy, but they were honest. The first time we handed them out, there was a hush in the room. Women flipped through the pages, some laughing at the familiar phrases, others tearing up when they saw their own words printed back at them. That night, I sat with Ivy in the dining room as she worked on the second edition. I watched her fingers move with care. She had grown up so much in just a few months. She had made space in her life for pain, and somehow, in that space, she had built something new. I told her I was proud of her. She looked up for a moment, then kept working. No words needed. Later, I found a note tucked inside one of the booklets she'd left on my bed. It said, "Thank you for being a safe place, for letting me grow without guilt." My hands trembled slightly as I held it. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth of it all. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it is the choice to stay, to listen, to remain soft even when the world tries to make you hard. In the quiet of that night, I realized something. I hadn't just created a home for women. I had created one for myself, too. And for the first time in decades, I no longer felt like a guest in my own life. The final court letter came on a rainy Thursday. I had been folding sheets in the laundry room when Sheila called and asked if she could come by. She showed up soaked, holding a manila envelope like it held something sacred. She didn't say much, just placed it on the kitchen table, stepped back, and waited. I dried my hands and opened it. The ruling was final. The legal title to the property was restored to my name, and the foundation we had built under Derek's filings was fully transferred into the new non-profit we'd created. All family members with previous authority were removed. I was officially, legally, and wholly free. No fireworks, no applause, just the rain tapping gently on the windows and the sound of Ivy laughing faintly upstairs. I sat down and placed both hands flat on the table. My name, after all these years, mine again. I didn't cry, not in that moment. The tears had come in so many other forms along the way. I just let the silence soak in, like warm sunlight after a bitter winter. Later that afternoon, I gathered the women in the main hall. We had a small ceremony, not formal, not public. Just a circle of those who had been walking this road beside me. I told them what had happened, that the house, the garden, the rooms they had filled with healing and stories were now safe, that no one could sign it away again. One of the newer women, Maria, who barely spoke the first month she arrived, raised her hand. She said she never believed a place like this could exist, that someone like me, a woman her mother's age, could be both soft and unshakable, and that now, maybe, she could believe the same for herself. We didn't clap, we just nodded. Some cried, some just breathed a little easier. A few nights later, Ivy and I lit a fire in the backyard pit. Not for warmth, but for closure. She brought out a stack of old paperwork, copies of the documents Derek had forged, the first trust deed that listed me as co-owner, but never as decision-maker. A photo of the original foundation board, with me cropped out on the edge. We burned them slowly, one page at a time, not out of anger, just to release them. The ashes danced upward into the dark sky. Afterward, Ivy handed me a new sign she had made. It read, "Cranston House, a home by choice, not by force." I ran my fingers over the lettering, simple wood, nothing grand, but truer than any name it ever had before. She asked if I wanted to say something when we put it up. I told her no. Some truths don't need to be spoken twice. We nailed it in place the next morning. Just us. Just quiet. Just right. Since then, life hasn't been perfect. The wounds don't vanish just because the paperwork says you're whole again, but I have a space where I can breathe, where my name is mine, where my voice echoes back from the walls like it was always meant to be heard. And every so often, when I walk by that sign or hear laughter from the garden, I remember who I became in the ruins. Not a victim, not even a survivor. Just a woman, finally standing in her own name. And that, after all this time, is enough. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from a place of silence, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to reclaim your voice. Some of us aren't given closure. We have to make it ourselves. If something in this story spoke to your heart, I'd love to know how it found you. Your voice, your journey, matters more than you think.